China, the world's oldest civilization, was born here. Thousands of years later, it is one of the world's chess powerhouses. For most of the past 30 years, China has held the most prestigious title in women's chess. The legacy of the Women's World Championship is rich. Menchik, Gaprindashvili and Chibanonitsa, Kosteniuk, Xijun and Ho Yifan. Now, three-time world champion Ju Wenjun is defending her title once more. After vanquishing the likes of Katerina Lagno and Alexandra Goryashkina, another rival awaits. Challenger Lei Tingjie had to defeat 3 grandmasters in matches herself to get here. In the first 2 rounds of the candidates, she took on sisters Maria and Anna Muzichuk and won. Then in the final, she beat former world champion Tang Zhongyi.
And that's it!
Resignation! Lei Tingjie, the winner of the 2023 Candidates Finals.
Will Ju Wenjun defend, or will we have a first-time champion, Lei Tingjie? Half the match is in Ju's hometown of Shanghai, half the match in Chongqing, where Lei hails from. Who will win and claim their share of the €500,000 prize fund? Welcome to the official broadcast of the 2023 FIDE Women's Chess Championship. Hello everyone and welcome to round 3 of the 2023 Women's World Chess Championship. And right now the action is happening in the incredible city of Shanghai. After 2 tense draws and a rest day, our 2 players, Lei Tingjie and reigning 3-time world champion Ju Wenjun, are returning to the board. Will they return refocused, rejuvenated, with more tricks up their sleeves? Well, we will find out. I'm your host, International Master Ivanka Halska, and it's a great pleasure to be commentating for one weekend and one weekend only alongside the fantastic Grandmaster, commentator and streamer, Daniel Naroditsky. Now, Dania, a little birdie tells me that you've been doing some commentary yourself this morning.
Well, your little birdie, your Lord Varys is correct. Ivanka, first of all, a great pleasure to be joining you for commentary these next 2 rounds, 2 very important rounds. I have been doing some bullet commentary here and there. It was crazy. It was fun. I'm not going to lie. I'm really, really looking forward to doing some classical time control commentary.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine commentating on a bullet game, which is just 1 minute when the players have so little time. It must be absolutely insane. And you mentioned classical games there, Dania, and we've had 2 classical games so far. And as you can see, the pairings, it is very even, both games ending in a draw. And yesterday, it was a free day. There you can see the players there sitting there getting ready to begin. How do you think they would have spent their free day? What would you have done, Dania?
I feel like players very widely on the continuum of I was out sightseeing and walked for 7 hours and did my 20,000 steps versus I laid in bed with my laptop. I prepared for the first 6 hours. I ordered DoorDash. So I think these 2 players can be anywhere along that continuum. I feel like, they tend to err on the side of the latter in a tournament as important as the World Championship. But I'm expecting high quality, energetic chess today. They better have gotten their sleep because I have no doubt that Lei Tingjie is going to come out with some fearsome opening preparation. You have to put pressure with the white pieces. That is one of the golden rules of any World Championship match.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have to get your opening surprises in. I agree with you when it comes to the rest day as well. I do feel that the players will have been just rejuvenating, just doing nothing, because this is a very, very important match. As you said, this is make or break, especially for someone like Lei Tingjie. This could be her only shot at Glory. And let's take a look at their head-to-head statistics, because I'm a person that loves the numbers, even though ultimately sometimes the numbers can be quite deceiving. And there we see that Ju Wenjun is the more experienced player. She is, of course, older by 6 years, but when it comes to classical rating, not that much difference. We see Ju Wenjun 2564. She's actually ranked number 2nd in the world. And then we have Lei Tingjie ranked number 4 with 2554. Not much in it, but when it comes to their actual head-to-heads overall, we see that Ju Wenjun does have a lead with 8 victories, 11 draws, and 2 losses. Do these numbers actually play a role, do you think, psychologically?
I think they do. In general, they're dwarfed by experience level. And obviously, you can only talk about the experience level of one player in this match. Ju Wenjun harnessing her experience in top tournaments and world championship matches to quell the butterflies in the stomach. And both players have a lot of butterflies in their stomach. But having a plus score, I mean, it doesn't hurt. But it feels like the world championship is a whole different animal as we see the ceremonial first move executed. Joanka, I have mixed feelings about this entire procedure, this ceremony, but I'm going to keep my mouth in the shut position for now because I'm excited to see what they're actually going to. Oh, they're making 2 moves. They're taking this to a whole new level.
Yeah, I forgot to tell you about this one. Yeah, this one is completely different. White and black get to make a move, and this one is the most conventional we've seen so far. We have seen other players like try e4, a5, which was quite nice to see, but okay, e4, e5, and the moves have been taken back. And like you, Danya, I am so excited to see what Lei Tingjie will employ with the white pieces. I mean, you kind of mentioned it earlier, but how important is it for Lei Tingjie to spring that surprise? I mean, she's been putting a lot of pressure on Ju Wenjun so far, but now, do you think it's important for her? She tried e4. Maybe is it time for her to try d4?
Well, since this is her first game where a player repeats colors, I think we're going to find out a lot about Lei Tingjie's general opening strategy. There are opening repeaters, players who feel more comfortable throughout a match repeating the same opening and maybe making marginal improvements. And then there are players who are at the other end of the spectrum and play d4. Lei Tingjie, she can play e4, she can play d4. Very universal style in general. Will we see another Berlin? Well, if we will, then it's up to Ju Wenjun to play the opening and middle game a little bit more precisely, because there was a certain point where she was in serious trouble in game 1. And if Lei Tingjie can continue applying that pressure, eventually the chess gods are going to smile in her direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Ju Wenjun has been put under pressure, and she has been forced to make some very accurate defensive moves at time. And let's remind ourselves of the time control. After all, we did have a rest day. We might all have forgotten. It's a standard classical time control, 90 minutes for 40 moves, 30 minutes added after move 40. But this is the key point. There is a 30-second bonus time added from move 1. So both players are very familiar with this time control. Is that going to be an advantage for them playing in such a high-pressure event?
Yeah, this is the sort of vanilla ice cream, garden variety time control. I like it. It's simple. It's not too long, but it also avoids the crazy time scrambles of a continuous time control without sudden death. I think the players are probably most comfortable precisely with this time control. And obviously, my favorite part of each game is the time pressure leading up to move 40, because that decides a lot of outcomes. Time management, incredibly important when you've only got one time addition, and we will follow the player's time management throughout the game. A lot depends on whether you expect your opponent's opening choice.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think the clock is my favorite part of watching a chess game. And especially when they get down to the last minute or so, you're like, oh, okay. And we do see the players getting in the zone. And are you an expert at reading body language, Tanya?
No. There are many ways to read this. There are many interpretations possible. The players generally tend to avoid eye contact, I think, before any match game. One player chooses to look at the pieces. The other player looks underneath the table. One player looks at the ceiling. The other player looks to the side, but they never seem to look at each other. You got to focus on the pieces. And we're 1 minute away from the gong sounding. Big moment coming. I think Ju Wenjun is asking herself the same question. Are we going to see e4? Well, am I going to see e4? Am I going to see d4? What are the commentators going to see? That's the most important question.
That is the most important question. And we can see the players ready. As you mentioned, we are less than a minute away. And kind of wanted to draw attention to one thing. The players actually specifically chose the chairs that they're sitting in. I mean, the World Championship match is the only place I've ever seen where players actively get to choose on their seating arrangements. And there we see handshake.
Okay.
And they're off, and it is e4.
Okay. So repeating the first move doesn't necessarily mean anything. Now it's Ju Wenjun's turn, and she repeats her main move as well. Will we see another Ruy Lopez?
And this is the question. The knight does come out to f3. She's keeping us guessing. Knight c6. Where is the light squared bishop?
Well, it's likely that the light squared bishop moves, but we still don't know where it's going to move until now. It's another Ruy Lopez, and is it another Berlin?
And Ju Wenjun was surprised by game one, but there we see the knight developing to f6. A Berlin it is. I like it when the players have faith.
On the one hand, you know my attitude toward the Berlin, Yovi, but on the other hand, I also like to see opening repeaters because you actually get a really interesting battle going on throughout the match where the player's preparation is tested head to head and the player's choices to vary either subtly or in a big way, as we see in this game. D3, a completely different direction from game one. This is the anti-Berlin defending the e4 pawn. And of course, an ultra popular alternative to the more conventional castle's short.
Yeah, I was just wondering where the dark square bishop would develop to, and Ju Wenjun chooses one of the main lines, developing the bishop to c5, and both players playing relatively quickly. But yeah, here is Lei Tingjie's opening preparation in action. I really do like it when the players repeat the same openings because you get to see the psychology as well. Mm-hmm. You have that constant dilemma when you're playing this type of repeating openings. I mean, are you entering into your opponent's prep? Do you repeat the same thing that you've prepared before? What do you do? And here we see c3 coming from Lei Tingjie.
Yeah, c3 wasn't always the most popular move in the old days. They used to castle kingside right away, but then Berlin experts came up with this move, knight c6 to d4, paving the way for black to expand in the center. And ever since then, c3, as early as move 5, has been the order of the day. Now another big dilemma for white as Ju Wenjun castles. You mentioned the dark squared bishop. You can choose to develop it to g5, the most ambitious line. You can choose to not develop it at all, or you can choose to actively put a knight in front of it with knight b to 2, and later on get the knight around to g3. Lei Tingjie chooses the first option.
I mean, that's been very kind of typical of her play throughout this there's 2 games that we saw. She always chooses the most direct approach. She's, she really promised us fighting chess, and she so far is delivering. And again, the big question is, how are you going to handle this with the black pieces? I mean, I think it's quite trendy to go h6 and then follow it up with g5 at some point.
Very trendy. And I'm always terrified of doing that because the ghost of knight takes g5 haunts my dreams, or more precisely, my nightmares. I've also seen players try to slide their bishop back to e7 and disarm the pin, then play d6. This might be difficult in this precise position. I never seem to know exactly when white is allowed to take the pawn on e5. It seems that in some positions, it just wins a pawn. In other positions, it's way too dangerous. But somehow I don't remember bishop e7 being a popular move here. So I agree. I think we're going to see either d6 or maybe h6 to start. Any combination of the moves h6, g5, and d6 is going to occur in the next couple of moves.
Yeah, and you're right. Bishop retreating to e7 isn't the most popular move, but it is a possibility maybe after flicking in the move h6, bishop h4, and then break the pin. I have to say, breaking the pin is perhaps the most tempting thing to do when you're playing a world championship match, because you feel that somehow, especially with the black pieces, it should be safety first, neutralize your opponent's attack, and then you can get on with hoping for more. But go anything else, I don't know.
I don't know. And it's interesting to me that Ju Wenjun is the first to take a more significant think. Obviously, this position was on her radar. She knows the theory. So, as we've discussed before, it's important not to read too much into this. She might be remembering her preparation. She might be choosing between two lines that her and her team analyzed. So this isn't necessarily, okay, Ju Wenjun doesn't know what to do. She's panicking. Bishop g5, white is winning.
No, it's certainly not the case that. But at the same time, there is the dilemma. And what should Ju Wenjun play? And we see her look down. She is trying to recall her theory, just trying to choose the most practical option.
Mm-hmm.
And what are we going to see from...
Well, yeah, h6 I think is the most popular move according to the opening explorer, with d6 a close second. If we pull up the analysis board, just to make sure we're all on the same page, h6 and g5 is the most direct approach because it breaks the pin. White doesn't want to give away her dark squared bishop. That just doesn't make any sense. Now, after g5, knight takes g5 isn't really valid in this position. I was more or less joking because after white takes on g5, this works a lot better when black is a pawn on d6. And the reason why is that black can drop her bishop back to e7 and quickly move the knight away. And the king is safe. White doesn't have the firepower to follow up on the king side. So if this happens, something tells me that there will not be a sacrifice on move 8. And instead, after h6 and g5, white will play bishop g3, black plays d6, and it's a lot harder than it seems, Yovi. I think that's an important point for newer players to exploit black's pawns on h6 and g5. You can try to chip away at it with h4, but black is just going to keep things closed with g4. Later, the knight can jump to h5, so both sides can actually play on the king side, even though black is the one with the ostensibly weaker pawn structure.
Yeah, definitely. That is the case. But we also have an interesting kind of idea that the fact that white hasn't castled the king. So maybe black wants to hold off from playing g5 until white has moved the king on that direction.
And in that case, she would play d6 first, wait for white to castle.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then you can go your g5 ideas. And of course, the position is incredibly complicated here, and bishop out to g4. This is an important move to prevent white from getting a free rein in the center with d4. And,
exactly.
You don't want to be allowing that.
Yeah, and here white can't go g4 herself because the bishop on g3 sits on the pawn. A very typical kind of situation. And a very annoying situation. Black can then push g4 and expand on the king side. So a choice of variations, yes, but also a choice of what kind of position Ju Wenjun wants to get in the early going. Of course, you can play this line without g5. You can play d6. But I'll be honest with you, I actually don't know how you're going to get rid of this pin without going g5, at least in the long run. So I guess the choice might be between playing the immediate g5 and waiting for white to castle. But quite a significant thing here for Ju Wenjun. Interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. If we were to go back, I can answer the question that you had about the pin and say that your first instinct, remember that move about retreating the dark square bishop? That's actually the most popular move. So you go h6 first. Don't ask me why. And then once the bishop takes that step back, then you retreat your bishop to e7. And this one is the most popular move according to the database.
Okay, so if white plays bishop takes c6, I assume that black plays bc here? Yeah, bc, knight takes e5. Oh, this is really cool. And now knight takes e4 is the idea. Yeah, this is just something you have to know, right? It's hard to stumble on this. And the point is, if takes, then black takes with the bishop pair and restores the material balance. And if bishop e7, then I think the complications work out in black's favor because white's going to have a very hard time keeping the e4 pawn defended and keeping the king safe at the same time. Very nice.
Yeah, that looks certainly quite nice. So that's the most popular response to this. But you mentioned it that earlier, you have to know these tricks. And if you haven't done your homework or you've been surprised and this information escapes you in the heat of the moment, you might not see bishop e7 as a possibility. It is also possible to play d6, as you mentioned, and then just go for those more aggressive lines.
Now that bishop e7 looks really safe, though, now that we have established that bishop c6 isn't dangerous, right?
Yeah, so the main idea after bishop e7 is that white simply either goes knight bd2 to keep the flexibility or just castles.
Mm-hmm. Then probably d6.
Yeah. And you can go d6 main move, and then now you castle. Although I can see sometimes you get to see, just by looking at the cloud, you get to see whether people have been experimenting on this, and you occasionally stumble upon analysis that was made by the seconds. So this happened during the Magnus Carlsen Jan Nepomniachtchi. I was on the cloud just looking at the opening database, and I was like, you know what, this has been analyzed literally last week. And they analyzed this, and here it stopped.
Yeah.
And
who was Purple Elephant 561? Purple Elephant 561 analyzing this exact position 1 week ago at 3 a.m. Eastern time. Who could that be? And of course, that reminds me of the Ding Nepo match as well, with the Lichess account names that were uncovered, and turned out to be the players themselves. Report Ding Second and Ding Liren testing out some of the lines. You got to be a little smarter than that, though. You have to have more layers of security.
You certainly do, especially in this day and age when everyone is smart. Everyone is a data detective. So I agree with you there. But I did feel sorry for Ding when he was kind of ambushed with this during the press conference. And you saw that he had to bluff his way through this, and he just looked so uncomfortable. His face turned red, and he was like, what games? Nothing of importance there.
What?
Yeah.
Did you say anything? I didn't hear a question. No, it's cornered with that information. I can't even imagine sitting in a world championship press room, having to invent a story on the spot. Not what you were expecting to do after a 6-hour battle.
No, certainly not. And okay, on the subject, we mentioned that Ding Liren and his second Richard rapport, but we do have some information about these two, their seconds. So we know that Ju Wenjun, she's been working with Hari Krishna, and Lei Tingjie was spotted walking in with Timur Rajabov. So from there, we can make 4, or maybe we're making 6. But I would say it's a pretty good guess that Rajabov is working with Lei Tingjie. And both these players are exceptional, right? They're very strong 2700 plus grandmasters, very solid. Have you had any experience with playing Rajabov?
I've only played Hari over the board. I played him once, and I've played him in several rapid games. And I think Ju Wenjun's choice makes a lot of sense stylistically, because she is extremely positional. Very solid, very just close together, and Hari Krishna is like the modern day Karpov in that regard. He's got a very similar repertoire: e4, e5. Hari's more of an e4 player with white, at least in his youth, but he's switched over to d4 more. So this makes sense both from an opening perspective, but also from the perspective of someone who understands your style and who will help you develop ideas that cater to your style. And I think the same argument could go for Lei Tingjie, who I'm a little bit less familiar with stylistically, but I think prefers sharper positions to her opponents. And Rajabov has that edge to his opening repertoire. He was a King's Indian player for the majority of his life. So very, very interesting choices. But of course, as we know, Yovi, with a world championship match, it's not just about how close the person is stylistically. It's also, can you trust your second? Can you trust your second to give you good recommendations? Do you have a rapport, no pun intended, with your chief second? That might be the most important thing.
Yeah.
Sorry. I'm sorry. It's late.
That was good. I enjoyed it. Keep them coming.
BEA beautiful.
It is beautiful, certainly. And I take full responsibility for that one, Danielle. I'm sorry.
Please do. Thank you.
But I was just going to say that onto the last point that you mentioned, I think it's very important to have a good atmosphere, good vibes from your coach and your second, because this is also a very grueling event on them, and they have to understand you as a person. They have to understand how they're going to pick you up, how they're going to motivate you to continue. And again, like you mentioned, also it's all about the chess as well. You have to come up with good lines that suit your personality, your style. And I have to say, I'm not that familiar with Rajabov working as a second. Could this be the first time he's done it?
Absolutely. I think it likely is. I've also never heard his name mentioned as part of a larger team. So I wonder what it's like from his perspective. He must be feeling almost as nervous as the world champion contender that he's helping. You know, holed up in his hotel room, eyes on the computer, hopefully on our commentary. But you know, I wouldn't blame him if he chooses to consume the games through another channel. But I mean, I would. But let's not talk about that.
We most certainly would. I agree with that. And very interestingly enough, so Ju Wenjun taking a long think, deciding what